My son turns 3 next month. He was the one who couldn't sit still during the only one who couldn't sit still, and I believe is currently holding my wife hostage back in the nursery right now. So, but since he turns 3, we are in the throes of potty training right now. In the throes of it. There is just pee and talk of human genitalia flying left and right around my house right now, and it's just part of the world that we live in currently, and it's chaos, and yet it's fun, as you can imagine. He's tough to potty train, like a lot of kids. He's just really active, and so convincing him to stop and getting him to pay attention to what's happening in his body to go and do his thing is growing difficult, but he's doing a great job. He really is. He does so good, but it's all, one day is different than the next because of this process, and you try to stay positive and know that you're heading in the right direction, and then there are some days where you pick him up from daycare and they say you didn't have an accident all day, and then he's in 3 different pairs of underwear in 2 hours by the time we get home, and that's just kind of the way that life is, and sometimes you just have to walk away. Like the other night, he was over in his little play area playing, and then he kind of like squatted down and disappeared for a second, and we're like, Cameron, did you just go? And he's like, yeah, you got on the floor a little bit. You're going to need to clean that up. And you just have to take a breather and walk away at times. But then when you're able to step back and understand, to have a little bit of perspective, one of the things that has allowed me to stay patient throughout this process has been just the fact that it's all progress. Even the days that feel like we've taken a step backward, it's all part of the process. And I don't think that where we are today is where we're going to end up in the future. I don't have a fear that my son is going to be 23 years old and still wearing diapers or having this issue. Like at some point, he's going to get it figured out. And I keep that in mind. That lets me understand that this is all just a part of this process. If we avoided it altogether because it was too much of a struggle, then we would not set him up for success later on in his life. That would not be what's best for him. And so we can recognize that what we might view as accidents or we might view as mishaps are actually necessary parts of the journey that we're on. If they don't happen, then there's no progress happening, right? And whether it's potty training a 3-year-old or it's the life that we live, we can understand that life comes with detours. Life comes with mishaps. Life comes with steps back. Life comes with U-turns. But what we learn about life is that our detours don't determine our destination. Our detours don't determine our destination. And of course, at 3 years old, he doesn't have the capacity to think in this way about the journey that we're on and the process that we're in and all of that. He just is living day by day, moment by moment, I think even second by second. But if you're anything like me, I don't want anything to be a process. I like instant gratification. I want it done, and I want it done now. This is the reason why growing up, I really was into sports and struggled when I was exposed to music and things like that. Because, you toss a ball to me and I had a bat and I could whack it. You put it on a tee and I could hit it. Football, if you were carrying the ball, I could run after you and I could tackle you. But if you handed me a guitar, I couldn't just instantly begin to strum a tune. You get what I mean? It took time. So then that thing just went by the wayside because it was a total waste of time because I wasn't, John Mayer the second that I picked up a guitar. And it wasn't worth it for me. But much of life is a process. Almost all of life is a process. And the second that we desire instant gratification in every corner of our life, we will meet every single detour. We will meet every single part of our life and eventually throw our hands up and say, forget it, this isn't worth it. I give up. And there will be nothing left in our lives to do. Because much of life is a process. Growing into a human, understanding who we are, is a process. Growing up into an adult is a process. Moving to a new place and understanding how it works and finding out who we are within that context is a process. Learning to love is a process. Growing in relationships is a process. Every single part of life that is worth doing, that is central to human existence, takes time. And it comes with failures. It comes with setbacks. A new job is a process. A new marriage is a process. Maybe you're navigating the realities of grief. Grief is a process. Maybe you are in addiction, recovery from addiction. That is a process. If you're rehabbing relationships with loved ones and with family, that is a process that takes time. But if we're committed to these things, they are bent toward progress, day by day by day. We are bent toward progress and moving on. Life will always give us plenty of detours, but our detours don't determine our destination. And this is a struggle I think that many of us have, that we live with on a day-to-day basis, because this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When we allow our detours to become our destinations, we decide, instead of our destination being our destination, we make a detour and we just stay there. And we define ourselves based on a detour. We say things about ourselves, about what we've done, who we are, what we've become, because I've made a wrong turn, just like 100% of humanity that's ever lived. And yet, when we define ourselves based on our detours, guess what we're going to do? We're going to find every single possible detour there is to find because we think that's what we do. But if we define ourselves based on the place that we are trying to go, whatever that might be in our life, a better parent, a better student, a better brother, a better husband, it doesn't matter, whatever that is, if we define ourselves based on that destination, which Jesus has laid out for us, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If we define ourselves based on that, we might make a detour, but our sights are going to be set on the place that we are going, not the place we are, or not the place we were. When we define ourselves by our detours and not our destination, we will find ourselves making more stops on a detour. But no matter who we are or what we've done or what detour we are on or how long we've been on that detour, no matter what detours we've done in the past, the one who made you exactly as you're supposed to be doesn't define you by those detours. We talked a little bit about that last week, about how God sees you in God's own image. And it's possible for God to see you by your destination and not your detours, or not where you find yourself right now, because of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, which ushered in this new kingdom, this new definition that has transformed and changed our hearts, even if we don't live like it on an everyday basis. Because life is a journey. And this idea that life is a journey is all over the Bible, and it's particularly all over the Psalms. This theme is everywhere. And there are actually 15 Psalms within all, there's 150 Psalms, so 15, that's 10% for you mathematicians out there. I did that in my head just now. 15 of them are called Psalms of Ascent. And the reason they're called Psalms of Ascent is because the Hebrew people would sing these songs as they made their journey to Jerusalem, traveling to the temple to do their religious duties. And Psalm of Ascent because Jerusalem is a city on a hill. Maybe that's an expression you've heard in the Bible before. So they would ascend up to Jerusalem to practice their faith together with the Hebrew people from all around the region, and they would go on these journeys and they would sing these songs and undoubtedly encountered a lot of detours along the way. They were literally on a journey toward holiness, but they knew the presence of God was the place that they would end up. And so one of those Psalms of Ascent is Psalm 121, and it goes like this: I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. And so these Hebrew pilgrims that were making their way to Jerusalem and to the temple would have undoubtedly hit all kinds of snags along the way, as you can imagine. This was a walking journey together that would have probably encountered weather. It would have encountered all types of things that you can imagine on the road. And then in addition to that, this is a group of people, and this group of people would have included all types of different people. You probably would have had pregnant women, you would have had kids, young and old, you would have had folks who were less physically able, folks who were a lot longer in years that made it hard on the journey. Imagine the detours that would be necessary when all of these people come together, not just for a journey, but a journey which takes a lot of walking, physically taxing. And so what they would do is they would sing these psalms, and what would the psalms do? They would remind them, no matter what they're facing in their own life or on their literal journey to Jerusalem, that they would lift their eyes to the hills because their help comes from the Lord. That they would look up, that they would not look at their detour and look at their struggle and look at their heart rate, but they would remain focused on the destination, which was ultimately the presence of God found in the temple together. They didn't doubt they would end up where they set out to go because they knew who their help was and they knew what their destination was. So their detours didn't determine their destination. And we use a really churchy term for this in the church that talks about this idea of a journey. And this word is discipleship. Discipleship is a journey of faith, would be a way to think about that. The way that we are being shaped and molded into someone who is a disciple, a follower of Jesus. And here at our church, we think that there's 4 main ways that we accomplish this. Everything that we do that grows us as a disciple can be categorized as worshiping God, learning together, serving others, and creating community. Something is going to be under those umbrellas when it comes to discipleship. That we worship God, we learn together, we serve others, and we create community, all in the midst of which we have our collective journey as a church, both locally, regionally, globally, and individually. We have our own journeys of life that we are on. And yet worshiping God, learning together, serving others, and creating community says nothing about the circumstance in which you find yourself doing those things. Discipleship happens in the middle of the good and the bad and the detours and the destination. Discipleship happens through it all. But much like everything else, discipleship is a process. It is not a place that we can end up necessarily. We have a destination, and yet discipleship is the journey on which we march toward that destination that Jesus ultimately is responsible for bringing about, and we trust that he will. With each passing day in the journey of discipleship, we can recognize the blessings and the growth and the difference and the transformation in our lives, in the good and the bad. And the goal of faith is to grow our relationship with the God of grace, which can happen in all sorts of ways through all sorts of means. A pastor, theologian, and author, Eugene Peterson, who, if you're familiar with the Message version of the Bible, he penned the Message version of the Bible, refers to this idea as a long obedience in the same direction. A long obedience in the same direction. He titled his book that. This book is about the Psalms of Ascent that we just talked about a minute ago. A long obedience in the same direction. He takes the idea of our hurry culture and our culture of instant gratification and contrasts that with the journey of faith and the journey that Jesus has invited us on. And he writes this in that book. He says, "There's a great market for religious experience in our world. There is little enthusiasm for the patient acquisition of virtue, little inclination to sign up for a long apprenticeship in what earlier generations of Christians called holiness. Religion in our time has been captured by the tourist mindset. Religion is understood as a visit to an attractive site to be made when we have adequate leisure. The desire for instant gratification wins out over nearly everything. Because I think in our culture, we look at a time where, I think in our Western context, we live under this probably less than completely accurate, nostalgic idea that at some point everybody's life revolved around Jesus within the United States, right? We have that idea or vision in our head that that's the way the world used to be, and we're getting away from that. And I do think it's true that we are seeing obviously less and less and less people plugged into a church community, but I think you could take nearly anything that takes time and takes effort and plug it into this quote and it would work just the same. Do you know what I mean? Anything that doesn't require instant gratification could be plugged in here. Where he talks about religious experience, where there's a great market for community improvement, but there's little time and little effort made to actually improve that community. There's a huge market for feeding people and for serving people and for removing people from homelessness, and yet the effort that it takes to go about actually doing so is a little bit less popular. Do you see what I mean? So we can attack religion within this quote, and I think that that's true. But this is the cultural battle that we are up against, and we will always be up against it. The desire for instant gratification often makes us give up on the slow and steady work of God's grace. Our desire for instant gratification makes us give up on the slow and steady work of God's grace that happens moment to moment, day in and day out. This is how relationships work. This is how relationships happen. We have a tendency to want to arrive at our destination before we've even set foot in the car. We have a tendency to want to arrive at our destination before we've even bothered to really set foot in the car. The car trip is part of the process. It is necessary. If you would like to go to the beach, you're going to have to be in the car for more than 5 minutes, from Missouri anyway. If you want to go to the mountains, you're going to have to be in the car for longer than a couple of minutes. The process is necessary, and yet we believe that the process is worth it. A few weeks ago, when we were on our mission trip to Colorado, we had some amazing drivers who went through all sorts of, they were in new places with a rowdy group of people in the back seat on bumpy roads and through one torrential, it was seriously torrential storm. And we powered through it, and we're thankful for the people who committed that time. But I'm going to tell a story on one of them that I'm not going to mention my name, so you guys can discuss afterwards. We were on our way home, and we stopped at a gas station. And I think maybe it's like our last or second to last, like we were close to home. And then everybody's back in the vans, and we leave, and we turn to go back on the highway. But it was one of those where you kind of go back the same way that you came in, where you get off and then you make a big old U-turn, you come back on the highway. You know what I mean? So it wasn't very intuitive. You make a wrong turn, and then our driver makes a very careful, however fairly ill-advised U-turn. And then we're back on the road, we're back on the highway, and off we go. A little bit of a detour, people who are on the trip are laughing because they know who I'm telling on, but you don't, so it's fine. But we're back on the road. A little bit of a bump, a little bit of a detour, but it didn't take long for us to move on, because we recognized that the person who was in control of that vehicle had gotten us 10, 11, 12 plus hours all the way to Colorado Springs, and 10, 11, 12 hours all the way back with a high level of care. So we never had any doubt where our ultimate destination was going to be. The detour did not bother us because we were on our way home, and we knew that we were going to get there. No matter how many U-turns, no matter how many detours, no matter how many bathroom stops, no matter the weather, the ultimate destination is what was in mind. And when we go on road trips, we anticipate all of the things that the road trips bring. We know it is going to take a while. So we bring our travel pillow, we bring our snacks, all the things, right? We load ourselves down to go in the car, and we know that it's a part of it. When we go to a new place we've never visited before, we know we're probably going to make a wrong turn, even if we have the help of technology. It just happens. It's part of the deal. U-turns are a part of the operation when we are on a journey. we recognize this and we don't think anything of it. Even if we get a little bit snippy with our spouse or our family who are on the trip with us, we still recognize that this is part of the journey. But if we recognize that life is a journey, why do we not have the same attitude about the detours and U-turns that we need to make in our lives? It's a part of the process for a road trip. But when it's my life and the way that I'm living and the things that I'm doing, U-turns and detours are unacceptable. And in fact, we may think that they're even more unacceptable for other people to make than ourselves. But detours are part of the process. And if we can recognize that, then we will be able to live a life where we know that detours don't determine our destination. Because when we end up on detours on the road, we don't make a detour on our way down to the beach and stop somewhere in the middle of Kentucky because we made a wrong turn and say, well, I guess we'll just go here instead. We don't make a wrong turn when we're moving, we're in the U-Haul, we make a wrong turn, we get lost and think, well, I guess we'll just move here instead. We know what our destination is, and our detours don't stop us, our detours don't slow us down. So what if, instead of looking at our detours and our wrong turns and our U-turns as mistakes, as mishaps, and defining ourselves based on those mistakes and based on those mishaps, we can say, what is happening in the middle of all of this that is allowing God to mold me and shape me and make me in a way that he wouldn't have otherwise? Quick example for me, my car is in the shop this weekend, and it was on Friday. I was just going in for a quick oil change. I was like, I think I'm going to need new tires. Let's do that too. So I talked to them on Friday, and they're like, okay, well, we can do that. You definitely need new tires. We think at least 2. I said, just do the whole set, so we'll move on. So they're like, okay, great, we can do that. But we're not going to be able to get the tires in until tomorrow. We'll call you tomorrow if things don't work out, so you can come get your car, and then you can come bring it back in whenever the tires are ready. This was on Friday. They said, come tomorrow. We'll call you if they're not going to be here. They're closed on Saturday. So my car is stuck at the shop all weekend long, and I got nothing to do. So I don't know what they were thinking, that I could just somehow get told it went, well, they're not even going to be there come Monday probably. So I got to wait not just this weekend with no car, but then Monday I got to figure out how long it's going to take them to finish the job and give me my car back. But this morning, I came to church like I do normally, really, really early. Kind of got ourselves prepped, waited for everything to be in. And one of the blessings, too, of pastoring in a town like Centralia is I just drove home, picked up my family, and I came back to church. I don't get to ride to church. It felt weird, right? It's not a normal thing. It probably felt weird for them, too, that we were all riding to church together. A blessing in the middle of the chaos. I don't think that makes me less upset that I'm going to be sitting at the car shop on Monday morning waiting for my car, but it was a blessing in the middle of that detour. And so how can we examine the things that we think are setbacks or mishaps that we now say, I am a failure, I am a mistake, I am blah, 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 and begin to ask ourselves, how can I enjoy this visit of where I am now? What is God bringing about that's somewhere different? Have you ever been to the place that you lived and you drive around and you just make a wrong turn, or maybe your GPS takes you to a different part, like a different direction than the way it brought you to your destination? Brittany and I do that all the time, and we're just like, well, we're just seeing a new part of the city today. Seeing some new streets we've never seen before. Why can't we look at our life in the same way? Because the scripture tells us time and time again, we see Joseph in the Old Testament, and his family takes advantage of him and sells him into slavery, and then he meets back up with his brothers who have done this thing and forgives them, and he says, what you intended to harm, God intended for good. And Romans 8:28 echoes the same thing, and it says that God uses everything for the good of those who love him. It doesn't mean that God does everything for good. It means that God uses everything, even the mess, for good. And if God is for us, if God uses everything for good, then we certainly should too. Because God's love is so expansive and never-ending that there is no detour that changes our destination. There is no detour that removes God's love. We are resurrection. See, when we look at the death of Jesus must have seemed, and no, it did to the disciples. The death of Jesus must have seemed like a dead end. It must have seemed like some kind of awful detour. And yet, miraculously, on the third day, Jesus makes the most amazing U-turn in the history of the world. And we can recognize that if death is not a dead end, if death might only be a detour on the way to our own destination, then how much more can the things that we deal with and the things that we live with and the hurt and the grief and the pain and the mistakes and the mishaps that we experience in life, can we say, then that has no shot at being the end for me. If death is not the end, then this certainly won't be either. For I am a person bound for resurrection, caught up in a grace so great and so powerful and so loving that, yes, we want to work to avoid detours, but when they happen, we're pointed in the right direction through repentance, and we move on. We recognize that resurrection is our destination, so there's no detour that can ever stop us. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. And so this is kind of how